Hello and welcome to Tech Room. This time we're taking a look at the second $150 PC and upgrading it into an entry-level gaming PC. The original PC came with a 4590 non-case CPU, an Asrock B85 motherboard, 8GB of RAM, a 500 and a 160GB hard drive, as well as a 120GB Kingston SSD. The system was powered by a 600-watt Cooler Master power supply. The graphics card was a crappy old Radeon HD 5770, which we'll be replacing with a Gigabyte GTX 774GB for this entry-level build. The i5 4590 is a 4th generation Haswell CPU launched back in 2014. It features 4 cores and 4 threads running at 3.3 GHz with a boost frequency of 3.7 GHz, which will do just fine for most easier to run games like Fortnite, CSGO, Dota 2 and Apex Legends, even in 2019. The GPU of choice for this build, as mentioned before, is the Gigabyte Geforce GTX 774GB Windforce edition, which at the time of launch was a really good GPU. This one I got for free from my brother when I helped him track down a deal for an upgrade for his system. The 8GB of included RAM with the original system will also work fine for the kind of games we're aiming to run with this PC, and can always be upgraded to 16GB later if needed. When looking for storage for a system like this, I always want to include an SSD for the operating system to make the PC more snappy and have a faster boot time, as well as include a decent capacity HDD for holding games and more. This time we were lucky and the PC already came included with a 120GB SSD. We replaced the 500GB hard drive for a 1TB one because we wanted to use the 500GB drive in another build. The original case that came with the PC was definitely not up to the task if we're going to make a profit out of this build, and we had to replace it with something much more appealing. The choice landed on the Aerocool Bolt, which with its tempered glass side panel and addressable RGB in the front is the best value case I can find at the moment. With a price tag of $40, it's just a steal. Cable management can be a bit of a chore, but for the price I can't really complain. So, let's break down the total cost of this entry-level gaming PC build. We paid $150 for the original PC as part of a deal where we bought 2 PCs for $300. The GPU we got for free. For the 1TB hard drive we paid $17 USD, and the case we bought new for $40. Bringing the total build cost to $207. Which for the amount of performance and looks we're getting with this system is really good value and should translate into a good profit when we sell this system on. So, let's get on with the build. So the build is complete and I think it turned out really well and looks really good. The original PC had an activated Windows 10 license, which means we don't have to spend money on getting a license key. We added a 120mm fan to the front of the case for some better airflow, and some red LED strips to the top of the case for some extra bling. All in all, the build process was smooth, and thanks to the good looks of the case and the RGB bling, it should appeal to a lot of gamers out there. When getting into benchmarking the PC, we started off with Cinebench R15 and got a multi-core score of 539 and a single core score of 145, which puts it at the bottom of the comparison chart for our previous builds, right below the 6500 build in multi-core and just 2 points behind the Ryzen 3 1200 build in single core score. When looking at the more recent Cinebench R20, we got a multi-core score of 1316 and a single core score of 356. That surprisingly puts it just above the overclocked i5 2500K build, and we see the same result when comparing single core performance. Moving on to Firestrike, this PC gives us a score of 7395, placing it again at the bottom of the chart. Not a great result, but considering what we paid for the system, it's not bad either. We can clearly see that the limiting factor of these results is the GPU, where the 2500K with the RX 470 scored almost 11,000 points in this test, leaving us with the conclusion that you could upgrade the GPU in the system for some substantial performance gains. TimeSpy is next, where we managed a score of 2093, almost half of the RX 470 rig. So even in this test, it's at the bottom of the chart. Again, we can see an almost doubling in performance with a similar system with an RX 470, further confirming that the GPU is the limiting factor in this test. Moving on to some real-world gaming tests, we start off with Fortnite at epic settings, where we have an average of 62.1 FPS, a 1% low of 44.2, and a 0.1% low of 24.1. Dropping the settings down to medium settings, but keeping the epic view distance, we see an improvement to an average of 131.1 FPS with a 1% low of 79.5 FPS. The 0.1% low is not really representable here, where it was caused by some early loading stutter where the game was loading textures and was not persistent throughout the gameplay. Apex Legends is up next, and at high settings 1080p we saw an average of 55.6 FPS, with 1% lows hitting just below the 30 FPS mark in intense situations, making it playable at high settings but not ideal for a competitive FPS shooter. Dropping the settings a bit to what I call competitive settings, meaning lowering model details and disabling volumetric lightings and a few other settings to get the FPS up as high as possible without a big impact on game visuals. We get an average of 67.5 FPS, with a 1% and 0.1% lows at 38.2 and 30 respectively. This gives the game the boost it needs to get over the magic 60 FPS mark and improving the 1% low to where I feel the game is very playable without noticeable slowdowns in intense situations. Continuing with the benchmarks, Dirt Rally is up next. This game is a few years old, but it's still pretty relevant when testing performance. At ultra settings using the game's built-in benchmark, we got a result of 89.3 FPS, with a 1% low of 73.1 and a 0.1% low of 70.9, which is a really consistent result, and at ultra settings 1080p, this budget build delivers a really good result with a really smooth gaming experience in this game. In CSGO, we're testing at high settings 1080p using the community benchmark map. There we see an average FPS of 191.9. Again, the 1% low and 0.1% lows are not something to worry about, considering it's something you only see in this benchmark and not when playing the actual game. During the testing of this game, I found this PC is running CSGO with a nice and steady frame rate, and the stuttering only appears when starting a new round before you're able to move. All in all, this rig runs CSGO very well. Moving on to some more demanding games, we start off with Battlefield 5 at 1080p high settings, and we see a result of 48.2 FPS, with a 1% and 0.1% low at 36.6 and 31.1. This result is very consistent and will give you slightly better performance than you will get playing this game on console. In all, this is a very playable result, free from stutters, and the frame rate feels very consistent throughout the gameplay of the first part of the Nordless campaign. To get the magic 60 FPS, we had to drop the settings down to medium, which I think is more realistic for a budget setup like this. The game still looks great at these settings, and we get a pretty good performance increase. With an average of 60.2 FPS, we're just above the 60 FPS target, with a 1% low and 0.1% lows hitting in the mid-40s, giving us a really smooth and playable experience. Rise of the Tomb Raider is another pretty demanding game. Although being a few years old, it's still not easy to run. We see an average of 68.5 FPS with the low percent results in the 50s and the 40s. And for an adventure game like this, it's very playable since the game is more about epic visuals and puzzle solving rather than fast-paced shooting action. Looking at the sequel Shadow of the Tomb Raider at high settings at 1080p, we had an average of 38.8 FPS with percent lows just above 30 FPS, giving you a console-like experience that doesn't bother the gaming experience. Dropping the settings down to low gives us a slight increase in performance to 46.2 FPS average, and we get a few FPS higher in 1% and 0.1% low. This modest increase in performance is mostly due to the fact that the game is pretty CPU demanding, and we have a CPU bottleneck in this case, making the GPU not able to run at 100% usage at times. If I were to choose, I would stick to the highest settings in this game rather than gaining a few FPS at the cost of visual fidelity, since the slightly higher frame rate gained doesn't really add anything to the overall experience of the game. Finally, we're looking at two games using the Vulkan API, Doom and Strange Brigade. In Doom, we managed an average of 98.4 FPS with a high preset at 1080p, with a 1% low of 71.8 FPS. The 0.1% low of 9.6 FPS was just a single stutter in the beginning of the level and should not be representable of the overall experience. The game played fluently, and the performance of this game was really good. For Strange Brigade, we used the built-in benchmark at high settings, giving us a result of 49.4 FPS average, and a 1% low of 38.1, and a 0.1% low of 37.6 FPS, indicating a stutter-free gaming experience with this game. So, in conclusion, who is a PC for this for, and is a build like this relevant in 2019? A build like this would be great for someone just starting out in PC gaming, maybe someone coming off console and wants to try out PC gaming, or just someone looking for a cheaper PC for playing games like Fortnite, CSGO and Apex Legends. It would also fit perfectly for someone younger who is getting his or her first PC and just wants to play Minecraft or Fortnite, both of which are hugely popular with younger people these days. I would say a PC like this is relevant today in 2019 because of the value and the price to performance it delivers. As mentioned earlier, a lot of people just wants to play easier games and don't care as much for graphical fidelity or super high frame rates, and just wants a PC to play the games that they want to play, and is more concerned about spending too much money on a gaming PC. For a person like that, a PC build like this is perfectly suitable. I put this PC up for sale on Facebook Marketplace and ended up selling it a day later to a couple of parents who was looking for a PC for their son to play games like Fortnite and Minecraft. I put the PC up for sale for $325 and I ended up selling it for that price. In total, we paid $207 for this build and we ended up selling it for $325, leaving us with a profit of $118. Adding the total profits from building PCs in the other episodes, we are now at a total of $221 so far. Check in with us again soon and we'll be building a more performance-oriented PC for mid-tier gaming featuring an i7 and water cooling. Thank you for watching this video and don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in another video soon. Have a good day. Bye.